We're live. Willow just left. I don't know why. She was ready to rock and roll. Now she's walking away. But good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is 9 o'clock, June 27th, 2024. There's a lot of up-and-comings to go over. To include a brief discussion on what the 12Z European model did to us yesterday. Tried to break the weather sphere across all social media platforms with its major hurricane depiction in the Caribbean. Spooky, but we saw the same thing last year, so a lot of us seasoned veterans really didn't buy into it, and I hope a lot of you guys didn't either. But there is still lots of room on the table. There's lots of speculation on the table as well. Despite mounting circumstantial evidence, there are a lot of folks out there who are really rooting for this thing to fail. There's a lot of folks who just are, and I can understand why. Historically speaking and climatologically speaking, this is really abnormal. We've only had a few different years, 2005 being one of them, where we were speculating that there would be a hurricane in the Caribbean. And right now, the models are all singing in unison. They're singing in tune, but there's a lot of folks who are just hesitant to go that far into it because of the fact that this is such a rarity. And I definitely understand it. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to try to go forward and say, yes, hurricane expected, watch out, just as we talked about yesterday morning. We're going to continue to call it a tropical cyclone. There's a lot of uncertainty once we get past the Lesser Antilles, but as the title of this live stream implies, the Lesser Antilles should be on alert. If they weren't yesterday, they should be today. We should be prepping. We should be dusting off all of our preparation procedures. Our folks down there, particularly in the Windward Islands, but the Leeward Islands should still be paying attention too, because there's still lots of time. We still have at least a solid, we'll go ahead and guesstimate 500 miles before this thing is knocking on your door. So plenty of lead time, 3 to 5 days away before we start to see some substantial impacts. Right now, it does look like we're just about locked in to a tropical storm at the very minimum. As you can see, just as we talked about yesterday, guys, our forecast is coming together, and I'll do the introductions, or I'll say hello in a second, but I just want to blast through because today's going to be a busy day. Let's just put it that way. Here's disturbance number 2. This is Invest 95L, as we're all very familiar with, and formation chances kind of went up pretty dramatically yesterday. When we met yesterday, we were at I think it was 0-30, 0-40 or something like that. We were definitely still at a yellow blip. We anticipated this was going to go up, and I'm glad that National Hurricane Center is on the ball trying to elevate this and get this information out. That's perfect. That's what it's all about. Formation chances now are at a 40-70 split. 40% chance over the next 48 hours, 70% chance over the next 7 days. Environmental conditions are forecast to be conducive, and development of this system is anticipated. A tropical storm is likely to form this weekend, several hundred miles east of the Windward Islands, while the system moves westward at 15 to 20 miles an hour. So even National Hurricane Center is starting to use tropical storm verbiage in their discussion. And we don't want to forget about Invest 94L. Invest 94L has a lot of convection with it, so we're going to touch on that area as well, because we don't want to forget about our folks in Central America, Nicaragua, Honduras, Belize, the Yucatan Peninsula, even Jamaica and the Cayman Islands are getting some of that convection from 94L, so there's still a lot to talk on the table, and we're going to get right into that, so let's do it. We're looking at a close-up shot of our satellite imagery now. We're not looking far away this time. We have two very distinct areas that we need to pay close attention to. Here is 94L. Like I said, very robust thunderstorm action pushing up towards Jamaica. Cayman Islands are right on the outside periphery of this as it continues to wrap around this very broad area of cyclonic curvature. The wave is right in through there, if I'm not mistaken, based on current analyses. And you can see we are getting some gratuitous moisture and thunderstorm activity on the eastern sides of Nicaragua and Honduras. This is likely to impact Belize, Costa Rica, just to a southernmost extent of our wave, getting closer to El Salvador and even further to the west at Guatemala. So that's 94L. Lots of tropical trouble out there, and this is honestly what I believe is what's going to leave some residual moisture in the background for 95L. Here is 95L looking very almost August, September, to tell you the truth. But there's been conflicting reports, and I just noticed this a little while ago. I'm personally at a loss, guys. I'm not rooting for this thing to become strong, but at the same time, I can't argue with the data that I'm presented with, and I'm going to try to communicate it to the best of my ability. There's folks out there saying that this thing is getting whacked by strong wind shear. And to tell you the truth, I'm a little at a loss. I don't usually on satellite, whether it's Water vapor, infrared, visible. You can see when a storm is sheared, and that does not look sheared. That is a very healthy tropical wave. At this point, I would argue that that is a tropical disturbance, organizing a nice consolidated area of low pressure. And as you can see, all the talk of the Saharan dust, not looking too impressive. I mean, it's definitely still there. If this thing kicks up towards the north and leaves that 10-degree latitude line and it decides to wander just a little bit further, I'm talking a hair up towards the north, it's going to start falling apart. We're going to suck in a lot of that dry air. So we're walking a tightrope right now, but where it stands currently, just as we've been kind of discussing for the entirety of the hurricane season, the entirety of 2024, these lower latitude waves are going to be in a much more favorable environment. If you guys rewind all the way back to May 15th, when we were talking Eastern Pacific start of the hurricane season, season begins was the thumbnail on that live stream. I told you guys that if these systems stay to the south, we're going to see it running right along the periphery of that dry, dusty air, and that could help to enhance a little bit of the thunderstorm activity on the north side because it'll act like a dry line. And as you can see, our center is somewhere back in through here, and there is a lot of nice convection on the north side and on the west side, and we're starting to get a little bit of that intertropical convergence zone moisture along the southern periphery of it. So I'm not too sure where the wind shear is coming from. One area I do want us to pay attention to is the Tut. The Tut is right here, and you can see these northerly winds coming out of the north, headed down due south. We have a bit of an upper low that's postured just to the north of our the northeast, I should say, of our Lesser Antilles. This could potentially try to aggravate our shear out ahead of the system, so we'll have to keep a close eye on that. And then a lot of our models are upticking on this potential bad boy right here. There's another wave that's even further to the south in the wake of 95L. Some of the models, to include, of course, our old faithful GFS, wants to develop this. I'm not sold on that, to tell you the truth. If you look at it from, we'll say, something as giant as like the MJO, for example. The MJO, when it creates all that upward vertical motion that helps to stir up the tropics like this, you have outflow on either side, whether it be the eastern extent or the western extent from where the axis is currently located. And in this case, I really don't know if that storm is going to manifest itself as intensely as 95L could, because of the fact that it's going to be in the wake of our tropical cyclone out ahead of it, and it'll have to battle some almost localized induced shear as this system tries to undergo further genesis and strengthen up. Here's a, oh yeah, I also have this pulled up because I was obsessing over it. I'm like, shear, where's shear? Shear, what do you mean shear? We weren't expecting shear. And if you look, I mean, here is the 10-degree latitude line right there. Our invest is right there, sitting in about maybe 5 to 10, approaching 15 knot shear. It's still in a decent area. We're not getting blasted by the 25 knots, the 30 knots to the north here. So I don't know. I really don't know. I guess we'll kind of investigate that a little bit further. Here is a look at our true color visible satellite. Excellent signature, not going to lie. And I don't mean that in terms of like it's rapidly intensifying or anything, but this is a healthy tropical disturbance. It's already got the look. It really does, especially for this time of year. It's very eerie to see in late June that we already have. You can see some outflow coming up on the north side. You can see some outflow shooting out on the south side. And if you look very faintly in the cloud cover, we have that good low-level inflow wrapping in on the backside of the low that is covered by our thunderstorm activity that managed to sustain itself throughout the evening. There's, like I said, though, our subsidence, our sinking air just barely to the north of it. So we're walking a tightrope here. All of our models are in unison that this thing is going to continue to move off towards the west. We are just a hair south of our 10-degree latitude line. And you can see it too. There's the wind shear. You can see these upper level, the indications in the cirrus there ripping off towards the west in that easterly shear. Down here to the south, I really don't see that occurring. So I don't know. That's neither here nor there. Regardless, we have a pretty healthy signature on satellite. We can see it plain as day, and that thing is definitely churning. You come over to windy, and it goes without saying, there it is. We're really consolidating pretty quickly, and we're going to try to wander off the ITCZ as we approach the Lesser Antilles, particularly the Windward Islands. General thinking keeps it on a west-northwest track like this. more or less. So for my viewers down there, I'm going to bust out the handy-dandy map again so I can make sure to hit all the islands out there. Trinidad, Tobago, yes, you should definitely be watching this. Barbados, yes, you should definitely be watching this. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, yes, you should definitely be watching this. St. Lucia, Martinique, even as far north as Guadeloupe, I would suggest that you continue to watch, and Dominica. I don't want to forget you guys. So anywhere to the south, particularly of Guadeloupe and Dominica, is where I want you guys to really be watching. Dominica, however you say it. I remember you guys were trying to course correct me last hurricane season, and I haven't brushed up on that too much recently. But there it is. This is our 850 millibar flow. You come down to the surface, and honestly, not a whole lot changes. You can still see it's really consolidating. It's trying to come together. Very broad circulation. That's why I do think this is still a tropical disturbance. We're not to the depression or the storm status just yet, but we are organized, and we have very good conflicting wind flow here. We have easterly, northeasterly winds on the north side, and then we have southwesterly winds on the back side. So it's definitely a lot more impressive looking than, say, 94L, where you can see this thing still looks like a tropical wave trying to get its act together. I mean, we have a large area of almost no wind flow on the south side, but there's your cyclonic curvature in the winds indicating where that tropical wave axis could be. And then good convergence in the low-level wind flow right there. That's helping to fuel our convection that we saw on the satellite. Daniel Tanner, good question. Does Florida need to watch this? I'm going to say yes and no. The reason I say yes is because we're still on the radar 7 to 10 days out. Do I want to say, or I'm also going to say no, because the timetable here, 7 to 10 days out, there's so much wiggle room that could happen with this thing. So much wiggle room. We're still looking at a fanning out on all of our ensembles. We're very locked in at this point on the Lesser Antilles and a few of the Greater Antilles, which we'll get to here in a moment. But then from there, like we've been saying, from about 70 degrees longitude, that's when everything just fans out way too much. So if you live towards Cuba, the Cayman Islands, the Yucatan, Belize, Honduras, even all the way up into the Gulf Coast, I'm going to say yes, you should be watching this with one eye. You don't need to be worrying or preparing or concerned because we have such a long timetable still ahead of us. That's why, when I see discussions going on about, Florida, the Bahamas, and all that stuff, I don't really pay too much attention. I don't want to split hairs just yet because we're still a ways away. If you look at the grand scheme, if I zoom way out, we're still back here. Yeah, it's growing and it's moving, it's growing and flowing, but we're still at least 4 to 5 days away from the Lesser Antilles, and then we're still easily 7 to 10, maybe even more than that, almost 12 days away from anything happening in the southeast U.S. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Jamaica, yes, you should be watching this. That's kind of this entire area, if I'm going to be very general with my prediction here, this entire area, whenever something sneaks into the Caribbean, everybody needs to be watching. That's a given. That's a given. No matter what time of the year it is, I don't want to hear climatology, graveyard, wind shear, etc. I don't care about all that. Anytime a system gets in to the Caribbean, you need to be paying attention to it. Now, obviously, it's a give and take. Once again, it's a 50-50 shot. It could be even a 25-75% chance. 25% chance something does happen, 75% chance it doesn't. But regardless, the fact that it's inside the Caribbean to where if it decides to even go backwards, it's going to hit something. So that's why, yeah, regardless of what the status is, even if it's just a wave, as we could see here on the true color, not on the true color, on this satellite image, even if it's just a wave, you should be paying attention to it because you're going to feel effects. Anytime a tropical entity is in the Caribbean, you need to be watching closely. And right now, that seems to be the general trend. Here is a quick glance at 94L. I didn't want to leave it left out because you can see quite extensive amounts of thunderstorm activity. Looked like it was trying to get itself together yesterday before we hit that diurnal minimum and it started to get that land interaction on its south and southwestern quadrant. So a hefty rainmaker for folks who really don't. Actually, yeah, look at that. Wow, as it was cranking through there, we did see a little bit of a low-level spin. Now it's starting to fall apart as it pummels Central America. This is very reminiscent of what we saw last year with one of our invests. I forget if it was 97 or 98 98L back in, I think it was, late October, November. Very reminiscent of that system, to where we're going to see a lot of rainfall, a lot of heavy rainfall, flooding, potential mudslide, landslides out there, especially since we were inundated by our Central American gyre not so long ago. But this thing is more or less a dead stick at this point. Some of our models are still trying to squeak it into tropical storm status, but you can see, this is where I would pay attention. General trend is it's going to be a very weak, disorganized system. We only have one model, the ship's outlook, that brings it into tropical storm status, so I wouldn't be too concerned about getting a named storm out of this. We'll still continue to keep an eye on it naturally because it's out there and we have people in the direct line of this influence, so we're not going to just disregard it altogether. Folks, real quick, we have a lot of people watching. I love you guys for what you did yesterday. Yesterday's live stream, I got to adjust the camera. We're getting that sun glint. Yesterday's live stream, phenomenal. I so heavily thank you guys for hitting that like button, giving it that little nudge to get this information out to people. If I could please kindly request that everyone watching right now, if you don't mind, please give that like button a nudge. Let's get this information out because we need to be locked in. Like, Alfalfa Bill Enjoyer mentioned in the chat. Who was it? I saw somebody mentioned it. Barbados. There we go. Lisa Licious. Everybody out there in the Lesser Antilles, you need to be locked in, period. So please, let's nudge that like button. Let's get this information out because we're running out of time. The Lesser Antilles are almost guaranteed to see tropical impacts at this point. In fact, I would honestly say I'm confident enough to say you will see tropical impacts. From beyond that point in time, we don't know just yet. We're still examining the possibility, but Lesser Antilles, particularly the Windward Islands, we're confident that you guys are going to experience impacts, and we need to start the prep. We do need to start to prep. Morris Network, home of meteorology and technology, Trinidad and Tobago here. Excellent. You guys are tuning in. You guys need to be locking in. You need to be looking over your preparation and making sure that you have your flood and potential high wind, shelters and reinforcements in place. And what's crazy, guys, is if you notice, this is how locked in we are. Pay attention to the title of the chart here. We're no longer looking at our tropical depression probabilities. We are beyond that. If you really want to take a quick look at it, I'll pull it up for sake, but boom. Maxed out. 99.9% chance we are getting development. We are all the way through the threshold. Over the next 72 hours, we are as high as we can possibly go on this chart. 99.9% chance. 96 hours, that continues to carry on. That's why we're leading the way this time with our tropical storm probabilities. And you can see as we're crossing the Windward and Leeward Islands, the southern Leeward Islands, we are all the way up to a 75, almost 80% chance of tropical storm formation moving through that general area. And then at 168 hours out, which is about the 5 to 6 day mark, that's when you start to immediately see that fanning effect, like I've been saying. So Lesser Antilles, we're definitely locked in. U.S., British Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico should still be closely monitoring because what I've been seeing on the hurricane models is very interesting to say the least. I'll show you here in a moment. But Lesser Antilles, big time. You guys are on the clock. It is all hands on deck for your area, as us United States sailors would say. After that, we see a large divergence. I'm seeing signals of 2004 in there. I'm seeing signals of 2005, and I believe 1933 in there. So I'm seeing lots of signals going up, like so, and I'm seeing lots of signals going out. So we are very, very much so in a holding pattern. We really just don't know. Nothing is concrete once we get past the Lesser Antilles and into this grid box of 70 west, 60 west. This is where we kind of lose confidence, we lose faith. Before that, we are pretty much locked in. We're nearly at 100% of the forecast. In fact, I wouldn't be against putting out a cone of uncertainty with just an invest. That's how locked in we are, more or less. Here are, unfortunately, a look at the hurricane probabilities. This is our hurricane probabilities brought to us by the 0Z European Ensembles. And you can see our little areas are perking up still. At 144 hours, we are now up to about a 30-35% chance of a hurricane moving through the Caribbean. So like I said, lots of uncertainty. The models are definitely hinting this could go either way. It could definitely go either way, but we need to have all of our preparations in place. That is the key takeaway here, guys. We can't split too many hairs. I got to keep adjusting my camera. The sun is coming in. I might need to close my blinds. But that is the key takeaway, everybody out there. We have something coming in. We know the timetable on it, so we should be exploring all levels of possibility, and we should be preparing for all levels of possibility. Something as weak as a tropical wave that could induce flooding, something as potentially strong as a high-end tropical storm trying to get up towards hurricane strength, because the signals are definitely there. We have a large area of uncertainty, so our prep work as this thing approaches needs to be all-encompassing. After that, even in the hurricane probabilities, as a matter of fact, if you look, there's a small, very teeny tiny area there. I'll zoom in on it so you guys can see. There's a teeny tiny area of 40 to 45% chance of hurricane development out there just to the immediate south of Dominican Republic. So that's why I'm saying we got to keep paying close attention. We got to carefully watch this. Nothing is for certain after we crash through the Lesser Antilles, but the signals are there that definitely need to be watching, and we need to be dusting off our prep just in case. And then immediately after that, 192 to 216 hours, there you go. There's that fanning out. General consensus of a potential low-end hurricane approaching the Yucatan in Central America, and then we're still seeing the milky shades of probabilities headed up towards the southeast. If you come over to our European ensembles, notice we are very, very heavily converged on the leeward and windward islands, particularly favoring the windward islands. We are going to gain just a little bit of latitude over the next 4 to 5 days. Look at the timestamp here, folks. The timestamp is very critical. We still have approximately, we'll say, 4.5 to 5 days to prepare and get ourselves organized in the Lesser Antilles. You guys are going to be first. I've said it ad nauseum at this point. The front lines, you guys are our forward fighting position here, our DFP. It's coming into you guys first. You're going to have to face what it has in store for us, and then from there it becomes a lot more difficult, and I'll show you. Immediately after that, you go to 144 hours, and look at the fanning here. It's immense. It's a huge windshield wiper. We have a number of ensembles that still want to try to pull it out to sea based on the timing. Bahamas are under the gun. Florida is definitely under the gun. The Gulf Coast is under the gun, but then we have a large general consensus of Central America. So, it's very difficult, guys. There's no conclusion to be drawn here just yet. We're trying to nail it down. We're trying our best. That's why right now, up until that 60 west longitude, we got to be making our preparations. You are on alert. It's not waiting time. It's game time. All hands on deck in the Lesser Antilles. You need to be preparing. It's not a if, it's not a but, it's not a hyping. We're not getting excited. We're not sensationalizing. No, you need to be paying attention and getting ready. After that, we're still in monitor mode. You come on over to our GFS ensembles, and the GFS is kind of painting the same picture. Windward Island favorability with a few ensemble members trying to squeak up towards the Leeward Islands, and then from there, boom, we just fan all the way out. Although I'll admit, the GFS ensembles are giving us a bit more of that southeast bias than we are in the Central America bias. And I actually will tell you the truth, guys, I agree a little bit more with the GFS ensembles in here, because dynamically and looking at it from a physics perspective, this makes sense. The stronger it gets, it's going to want to pull north. That's if we don't have hostile conditions in the Caribbean. We don't have a tremendous amount of land interaction. We don't have any dry air from the Tut, any wind shear from our trough over the central Atlantic to slow it down. This makes a little bit more sense looking at just your generalized meteorology aspect of it. Stronger, more poleward, that Coriolis effect is going to come up. Weaker, it is going to keep moving west. That's why I'm a little iffy when I see these ensemble members going all the way to Cat 4 and just driving it west. I don't know. That unless we're expecting a very dominant ridge up here that there's going to be not a single weakness in it, then yeah, if we're expecting an immense blocking ridge, absolutely, I can see this thing just being bullied all the way into Central America, even as an organized tropical cyclone. So, at this point in time, being that we're so far out, I'm not saying this to threaten anybody in Cuba, Jamaica, Bahamas, Florida. I'm just looking at it from, we've even said in the chat, everybody, you guys have reminded me in the chat, but David, the stronger it gets, it's going to want to go north, and the weaker, it's going to go west. So looking at it from that same general perspective, if you notice, the GFS ensembles have our stronger members up here. The GFS ensembles have most of our depression and weak tropical storm features down towards the south. So again, way too much of a margin of error after this point right there to be speculating and trying to bullseye a landfall at that point. Right now, we really need to emphasize our Lesser Antilles, U.S. British Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, just as we've said yesterday, and I'll say it one last time before moving on. Puerto Rico, from west to east, Puerto Rico, U.S. British Virgin Islands, and all of our Lesser Antilles. We're talking from Anguilla, Barbuda, Antigua, St. Kitts and Nevis, all the way down to Trinidad and Tobago. And even the viewers from coastal Venezuela need to be paying attention, period. All right, here we go. So let's get into some of our hurricane models. We're going to get the HWRF out of the way first because the HWRF naturally has a tendency to really go gung-ho with these things. All right, can I get the sun out of this thing's face? There we go. Okay, kind of, sort of. Better. All right. We're going to get the HWRF out of the way first because, like I said, HWRF naturally has a tendency to want to ramp it up way too fast. So we're just going to get this one done right out of the get-go, and we'll take a look. So as you take this through time, we're expecting development over the next couple of days. HWRF is favoring that southern system. Take that with a grain of salt because we don't have an organized low pressure yet. We don't have any recon data to plug into these hurricane models. So this is still, there's still a lot of room for error with these hurricane models. We're just looking at them because we have them. It's another tool on our tool belt. So HWRF is thinking strengthening tropical storm approaching hurricane status and then finally achieving hurricane status as it moves into the Windward Islands. Take that with a massive grain of salt, folks. Please don't be concerned with this. I'm showing you the HWRF because we have the tools available, but please don't take this as the end-all, be-all. Remember, there's a lot of other variables on the table. We don't have any recon data. We don't have a closed area of low pressure. I mean, we do, sort of. We're getting there. So the models are not going to be as accurate as if we had fresh data to plug into the computers and then let them run wild. So these are their very, very first, or I should say initial rough estimates. And again, the HWRF loves to go bees to the wall, for lack of a better term, when it comes to strengthening this. And as you can see, as it moves into the Caribbean, we're deepening down to a Category 2 hurricane as it moves past. Just as I'd mentioned previously, it looks like our upstream system gets completely washed out in the anticyclonic outflow from that system. It loses its confidence in that development, and it becomes nothing more than a remnant low getting pulled in, almost a la Fujiwara, if you will, around our potentially deepening tropical cyclone. Let's move on from there, shall we? So now let's look at the HAFS-A. The HAFS-A is a bit more realistic. We're still expecting tropical cyclogenesis right around 48 to 72 hours. You can see at 48 hours, we have a bit of a closed low, starting to deepen it, and then as we're on approach towards the Lesser Antilles, we're down to a very high-end tropical storm approaching hurricane strength. This is a bit more realistic. So this is why I urge you guys in the Lesser Antilles, especially with an emphasis on our Windward Islands, we need to be prepared for tropical storm conditions regardless of whatever the case may be. Even if this thing is kind of struggling to get its act together as a tropical depression, tropical or a weak tropical storm, we're still going to see those impacts. Remember, tropical depression are winds between 30 to 38 miles an hour, we'll say. Sustained winds. Tropical storm is 39 and above sustained. So as you walk your way through the feeder bands and as that low pressure approaches, you're going to have occasional gusts going beyond that 35 to 39 mile an hour threshold. It's a guarantee. You're also going to have extensive rainfall with those feeder bands and as you get into the core of this system. So we need to be prepared for tropical storm style conditions while we still have time. If you look at the timetable here, we still have approximately 4 days. There's 96 hours right there at the top of the chart. I'll even put arrows on it so you guys can gravitate your eyes and take a look at the calendar here. 96 hours is when this thing is going to be knocking on the door. Barbados, Trinidad, Tobago just to the immediate south, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia in the immediate vicinity of that leading edge. With an approaching tropical storm is what we'll say confidently. As it continues through time, we see it trying to hold on to intensity, and this is what I was talking about. So as you can see, there is some dry air out ahead of it. It does look like the HAFS-A model does weaken it just a little bit, but in comparison to what some of our ensembles are showing, look at the prevailing wind flow here. We have an anticyclone parked right here that could try to move a bit further off towards the west. If it stays parked right there, it's difficult to see, but there is a call in the winds. There's a call in the winds right here over Florida. What that tells me as a forecaster, this thing has a greater potential of moving up like this in the short term, just based on our dynamics at this 700 and 300 millibar level. So that's kind of my take. It looks like the HAFS are trying to drag it just a bit further to the north, and we'll have to keep a very close eye on that. Remember, the uncertainty rapidly increases. I need you guys to realize that the uncertainty rapidly increases the moment we cross into the Caribbean. This is our zero barrier, and unfortunately, the Lesser Antilles, we're very confident you guys are going to be hit. After that, so much uncertainty. I don't want to start splitting hairs with you guys and try to act like I'm confident that it's going to go this way or that way. Just looking at the puzzle pieces, it seems as if the HAFS, the HAFS models, do want to favor a bit more of a greater latitude track. It could be anywhere in here, it looks like, just based on the pressure gradient and the wind barbs here showing our predominant flow. And then in the background, notice that the HAFS is coming up with something else. The HAFS has something else back down behind it, a little bit further upstream as opposed to the HWRF. So we can't rule out the possibility of at least another wave coming through for a 1-2 punch. You got the jab and then the cross. So we're going to keep a close eye on it. Here comes a look at the HAFS B. The HAFS B, I've noticed, does tend to get a little bit ahead of itself with intensification, but the timetable is more or less the same. You can see tropical cyclogenesis right at about the 2-day mark, 48 hours, and then from there it's off to the races. We're still seeing it deepening down, strengthening, still favoring a windward island bias. Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, pretty much the same general area. Martinique, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that general area is where we really need to be paying close attention to. Can I have my marker, please? Thank you. Right there. And as you can see, the HAFS B does intensify it a little bit more. We're looking at a hurricane here on this model. Take that with a grain of salt, please, guys. We're still ways out. We need to get some recon data to get a better idea. So this is a rough estimate, a very rough estimate. That's why, again, the conclusion you should be drawing is a tropical storm. You need to be ready for tropical storm-like impacts. And yes, I agree with Ethan. Let's get those likes up, please, guys. Let's hit that like button. We have so many viewers in here. I love this. This is excellent. I hope we have a lot of Lesser Antilles folks in there watching right now, because that is the primary, I guess you could say, viewer base I'm trying to reach right now. The HAFS B does take it right through potentially as a strengthening tropical cyclone, and then immediately after that, it still tries to go even further in terms of its intensity. And again, just like with the HAFS A model, the HAFS B does seem to want to try to guide it around our high pressure that's off towards the north, kind of like this. So, actually, I'm going to get rid of that arrow. I'm just going to go a cone of uncertainty. It looks like it does favor a bit more of a northward bias. The latitude, a gain in latitude, I'll say. And then the HAFS B does have a similar cyclone on the upstream side, so something to pay attention to. Let's see, what else did I want to show you guys? I think that's about it, to tell you the truth. That's kind of where we stand currently. Let's see, do we have our 6Z GFS ensembles in here just yet? Yes, we do. We have our 6Z GFS ensembles. All right, so 6Z GFS ensembles, we're pretty locked into the Lesser Antilles as always, and then still a bit of a fanning effect. You can see that we do have a number of weak members. The weak members, still, we're kind of in the realistic realm here. Weakened members do move off towards the west and fall apart in Central America. Our stronger members are trying to make a push towards the southeast, and it definitely seems like the GFS is honing in on Florida, the Bahamas, Cuba, Jamaica. That's the GFS, though. These are the GFS ensembles. So we take that with a grain of salt. Again, we're just looking at tools here. Looking at the overall general perspective here on our toolkit. And yes, I'll go ahead and show the wave heights. Do we have wave heights on here? I don't think we do. No, we don't. We'll have to use the European model. The overnight Euro, so yesterday, like I was telling you guys, the 12Z European model definitely threw us for a loop. The 12Z had it going all the way down to major hurricane status. It has since backed off, thankfully. You can see the 6Z European model does, in fact, have it strengthening down to 1,002 millibars on approach towards the Lesser Antilles. 0Z had it a hair weaker, a little bit more closed off. 18 Zulu showed much or less the same, so pretty decent consistency with the European model. But let's zoom out so we can look at wave heights. Let's see, significant waves. This is on the European model. Let's go back to 0Z so we can go a little further in time. Wave heights do increase for areas back in that area, particularly Barbados. It's going to be on that right front quadrant of the storm, and then right around where Martinique, Dominica, however you guys say that, please correct me in the chat if I need that correction. St. Lucia, we're looking at some pretty decent wave heights between 10 to 12 feet, maybe cresting a little bit higher than that. And then from there, I don't want to go any further because we just don't know. You can see at 0Z, 0Z did do a little bit more of intensification to it and moves it into Central America before slowly but surely trying to pick it up. The latest GFS run has 2 cyclones moving in, favoring a bit more of a northward bias, and then moving through into the Gulf of Mexico. Under the impression that there is no weakness, I see frontal activity here. I see fronts moving across the United States. So again, that's why I say don't pay attention after we get through the Lesser Antilles. Do not pay attention. Please don't try to estimate landfall. Don't start thinking Texas, Louisiana, Florida, and all that. Don't start getting hit. Don't start guesstimating that you're going to get hit, because the upper air pattern just looks way too unstable right now. We're going to see lots of adjustments in our track. If you notice, lots of upper-level features across the U.S. We have a dominating ridge, but then as that system comes in, we have a trough kicking through the northern United States. So we'll have to wait and see what this ridge does, what this trough does, if it moves slower, if it moves faster. If it moves faster, we could introduce this trough a little bit faster, greater amplitude. We have to see what the jet's doing over the northern Pacific, over western CONUS. There's a ton of different variables here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the jet, 7 different variables here that'll influence what happens down here. So definitely take with a extreme level of caution where you want to emphasize you see it going after the Lesser Antilles. The strongest winds, pimping 2033 for the Lesser Antilles. I would say prepare for anything between 50 miles an hour and 70 miles an hour, especially if we see influence of if we see intensification. Not going to go as far as to say rapid intensification or anything like that, because we're walking a tightrope here, as I showed you on the satellite imagery, the true color. We're walking right between a very favorable environment and an unfavorable environment. We have our low pressure right here, just to the immediate south, kind of hugging. We're running right along. I would say that's about 9.5 to 9.7 degrees of latitude is where that low pressure is currently. We're just to the immediate south of our dry air, and there could be a little bit of ingestion into it, depending on if there's a bit of a northern wobble. If this thing wobbles back and forth like a seismometer, notice how our cloud bands and our open cell cumulus associated with the dry air and the sinking air to the north is being tugged in on the eastern side or the western side of it. So we'll have to see if that does anything, although we have a lot of good thunderstorm activity out ahead. So perhaps we've already seen a bit of a reinforcing in our convection along the leading edge. The sun has come up, so we're now going to be approaching our diurnal maximum, which basically means the hottest part of the day, diurnal heating, daytime heating. We're going to see our upward vertical velocities go up just a smidge as we go through the day, and we'll have to see what happens. If this thing can wrap all the way around, we could see cyclogenesis just a little bit earlier. If the dry air to the north does, in fact, get close enough to impede on that center, we could slow it down a little bit. It's to give you guys an honest, and I mean a personally honest perspective. Personally, not professional, not scientific, personally. This is very, very uncharted territory. This is something we would definitely see in August, in September. It's very weird tracking a tropical wave like this June. As they say, hurricane season doesn't typically start until August, September, and October, and that's when we get our waves coming out. We have to watch the Atlantic and so on. So we're in fairly erroneous territory right now. We got to take it a step at a time. We can't go assuming. We can't go boldly forecasting immediately. Granted, right now it does appear that the Lesser Antilles are just about locked in 100%, and I would honestly be baffled if there's any other sources out there mentioning we're not locked in. We don't know. I'd be a little nervous. I'd be like, okay, now I feel like you're either fibbing or you just don't want to scare people. But regardless, people need to know the black and white facts, and the black and white facts is we have a healthy tropical disturbance moving in your direction, and that's the general conclusion. So we need to be prepared for impacts. That's the name of the game. So yeah, guys, that's all she wrote. Let me see if I can pull up that ASCAT. I saw somebody in the chat mentioning that. To tell you the truth, I don't look at that often enough to really see what it is that has in store. All right, so here we go. So our 12Z model guidance has come in comparison to 6Z. It's a little difficult to tell because the chart moves. The chart adds that category 5 threshold. Look at the HWRF. This is why I say don't pay too much attention to the HWRF. The HWRF is going all the way. It's all in. It's going full bet on this system. I would say right in through this general area is where we can safely anticipate the intensity of this system. So it almost does look like we're looking towards a Category 1 hurricane, just based on what we're looking at here. The Ensemble trend, we only have 1, 2, technically we only have 2. We'll say 3. We'll include the UKX2. But even the HAFS-A model here does try to squeak into that Category 1 threshold. So it does seem like the general thinking in here is here around day 4, we could be looking at hurricane barrel as opposed to tropical storm barrel. Obviously, I see a lot of these members here do go in earlier than that, guys, but I'm saying in terms of when we have the most operational models here, it does look like it's going to be at the 96-hour mark. We only have 1 and 2 and 3 that keep it as a tropical storm and don't want to intensify it. And then we'll just have to continue to watch. We'll just have to continue to watch because we do continue to see an uphill trend and then self-sustainment as it moves through. It looks like right at about 120 to 132 hours, the, quote, tropical graveyard of the Caribbean does try to influence its strength. Could also be land interaction like we saw. The HAFS models do take it fairly close to our Antilles, our greater Antilles. It does try to track up towards the north, so perhaps that's a bit of land interaction that we're also seeing that keeps it a little bit weaker. We should be getting 12Z data in over the next 3 or so hours, so we'll definitely have to keep an eye on it, and if there's anything pressing that needs to be communicated, we might jump back on here at the Weather Center helm and update you guys tonight. So right now, high-end tropical storm to maybe a low-end hurricane does seem to be in the mix. Right there. There's where our general takeaway is. That's the general thinking. There's our average. I would say you take the peak and you take the min, you get a nice comfortable average right in between there. High-end tropical storm to a low-end Category 1 hurricane with a number of a number of models going for Cat 2. So that's why I'm saying Lesser Antilles, if you notice, that's the day 4 mark. Lesser Antilles should be prepared for anything in this threshold right there. General thinking, the average percentile, the mean, the median, the median, whatever, tongue-tied. There's your mean average right there. So for viewers out there in the Windward, Leeward Islands, especially the Windward Islands, this is what you should be prepping for in-house. Right around there, just to be on the safe side. Obviously, good news if it goes down. Hate to say it, but if it goes up, then obviously we'll course correct if need be. But right now, it is a safe estimate based on what we're looking at that you should be ready for tropical storm impacts. Ready. Not thinking about it, not preparing. You should be ready for tropical storm impacts. Tamara Springer, you're very welcome. Brian, finally get to join your stream while it's live. Very good. I'm glad. Thank you for joining us. Naz, do you think this season could be as active as 2020, 2005? 2005 is still on the table, and I've been seeing a number of seasoned meteorologists emphasizing to their viewers as well that we can't box ourselves in. We can't box ourselves in. There's a lot of folks out there, seasoned weather forecasters, seasoned weather analysts, who are really against this thing doing anything. They truly are. The science and the historical data is there to suggest that nothing happens. There really is. I mean, we have a lot of data here that shows otherwise, but historically speaking, when we're not in anomalous or unusual territory, Most of the time, we're not sweating it because the dust, the sinking air, the trade winds, the upper-level wind shear is just not favorable. So there are a lot of seasoned vets who are going with climatology here and saying, don't sweat it, things going to be sloppy, it's not going to do anything. But we need to be prepared on both ends of the spectrum because both 2005 and 2020 are historical analogs for this hurricane season. And that's kind of the premise a number of our other end-of-the-table meteorologists are emphasizing here. 2005 is a NOAA and CSU analog, and in 2005 we had a major hurricane in July. Early July. I believe it's... I'll show you guys so we can fact check what I'm saying right now. I believe it was Hurricane Emily, if I'm not mistaken. Hurricane Emily. Yeah, 2005. From July 11th to July 21st. And you can see that we're seeing a fairly similar track here. The GFS is kind of emphasizing this track here. GFS ensembles are kind of splitting the difference, I feel, with Hurricane Emily, and someone even just mentioned in the chat right now, Hurricane Ivan. Granted, Ivan was at a totally different time, but you guys get the big general takeaway in terms of track. Another one here that I really lean on is Hurricane Elsa. Hurricane Elsa, I do believe, is another great analog here. Obviously, Elsa managed to track up and become a weather player for Florida, but another excellent analog, in my opinion, because of the timetable. If you look at the timetable for Hurricane Elsa, Elsa was right around this same general time frame, formed June 30th, 2021, and then finally we lost it July 9th, July 10th, 2021. So an excellent analog for us to use there. And yes, the 06Z EPs are out. They don't go very far out, though, unfortunately. And it looks like we have seen a bit of a weaning in our stronger ensembles. We're kind of favoring windwards, locked in. After that, we're still starting to see the fanning effect. So we'll have to wait and see what 12 Zulu shows us. Thankfully, it does look like the EPs have come down in general intensity. We don't have that northern side that has a ton of red members. Granted, it could be delayed. We don't know. But you can see that there is a clear distinction between the two runs. There's a little bit less activity on these ensembles than the previous. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, guys, that's all she wrote. We're going to start getting ready to wrap up the live stream. Thank you very much for the folks who donated. A big, gracious thank you for the donations. I do see them. I did see them popping up in the chat. I was just very involved with getting the weather information out, so I didn't want to take away from the discussion. But the $28 chat donations, genuinely appreciate it, guys. That means so much, especially since I'm very, very heavily obsessing over this stuff. I'm truly, and I'm not looking for a pity party or anything like that, but I'm definitely losing sleep looking at all this. I've been, I think for the last 3 nights now, I've been waking up consecutively at 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning to look at this stuff. As a matter of fact, I was going back and forth with some folks online at about 2:30 this morning looking at all the latest information. So trust me, when I say that we're working hard behind the scenes, we really are. I'm over here losing sleep. That's why I'm still sipping on caffeine. This is what's left over of my pre-workout here because I just need extra caffeine in my system for what's going to be a long next probably 96 hours. So yeah, guys. Thank you all very much for tuning in. Everybody has been a wonderful audience. It's so amazing, and it's such a blessing to have all you guys in the chat this morning. I sincerely appreciate you taking some time out of your morning, your Thursday morning, Friday Eve morning to come talk tropics and get ahead of the storm, whatever the storm may look like as we get towards the 72, 96-hour mark. Lots of lead time still, guys. I know we're looking at some very concerning signals, particularly for the Eastern Caribbean. But we still have plenty of lead time after that. If you guys look, this thing is working its way into the Eastern Caribbean, south of our Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico by July 2nd, about 6 days from now. So we still have a long time to prep, a long time to watch, a long time to speculate. Oh, it's going to die, it's slop, a major hurricane. You know, we have a lot of time to play around. We're just trying to get the timetables out there to you guys. The big thing here is the timetable. So please, From all you lovely viewers, if you could please give it a little nudge, that like button. Please consider clicking subscribe, making sure your notifications are turned on, and we'll be back at the helm very soon. Like I had mentioned earlier, if we see some substantial updates, we'll be back at it again tonight. We'll be doing 2 live streams. I even told my relatives and my friends, my family and friends, that I might be booked up next couple of days because we're going to be having to hunker down and start watching this, especially if we do see long-term trends that this could impact more than the Lesser Antilles. So please give that like button a little nudge. Let's circulate this information. Let's help get the word out. I know there's a lot of other big-name channels who are going to be saying the same thing. Let's get the Weather Center right alongside of them so we can communicate the big picture, because where there's busy tropics, there's going to be hype. There's going to be misinformation. So we got to be careful. We're in not only dangerous territory in terms of a storm, but we're also in very dangerous territory with folks who have a camera and a microphone and a phone. They're going to be blowing things up on social media, taking advantage of this extra traffic right now. That's neither here nor there. Yeah, that's the general takeaway. Lesser Antilles, your Windward and Leeward Island nations need to be preparing. I would say the Windward Islands need to be ready. The Leeward Islands should be prepared. And there's a difference. Ready means you're just sitting and awaiting impact. Prepared means you're anticipating impact, but it may not arrive. That's kind of how I look at it. If you're prepared, you're ready for the impacts. When you're prepared and ready, you're locked in, and it's time. It's coming. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Windward Islands from about Dominica, Martinique, Dominica need to be prepared and ready. Same thing with Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, all the way down to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Maybe even the ABC Islands should be preparing. And the Leeward Islands need to be prepared to get ready. Those are the big takeaways here. I'm getting a lot of emails all of a sudden. Sheesh. So it looks like, for someone who had asked earlier, I'm looking in my chat right now, the ASCAT missed the system almost altogether. There's no data over the ASCAT. I'm looking at it right now here on my phone. Z Ensemble members from the not the GFS, the Euro. Let me go over to Weather Nerds before we end the stream. I know, I'm sorry, guys. We're sidetracking and we're extending the live stream, but it looks like the Euro ensembles on Weather Nerds do go out a little bit further, and we won't have that pressure bias. So let's, we can also zoom in on here. Can also zoom in and forecast hour. This is 0Z. Let's go to 6Z. And let's go 144 hours out. So it looks like the European model is coming to its senses a little bit. There are some signals that our second wave could develop, but if you notice, the general trend here is weaker west, stronger north. So it's nice to see that the Euro is coming to its senses. We're not seeing major hurricanes or hurricanes going towards Central America. This ebbs and flows a little bit better with me. Even for a 6Z model run, this just meteorologically speaking makes a little more sense. Weaker west, stronger north. And I do agree, PM, this is looking very 2004-esque. I really want to see somebody official, someone really official out there say, 2004 is a new analog. We've had a slow start. We've got a neutral pattern, a warm neutral pattern. As of this morning, you look, we're in a warm neutral. We're not even in a cool neutral, in a warm neutral Enzo right now. So we really ought to start looking at 2004 being I was going to say algorithm, an analog for this hurricane season. We really do. We should have some more CPC data for climatology coming out again very soon for at least July and August to see exactly what Enzo does. But yeah, look at this. I mean, we've been neutral since the beginning of May. We're getting ready to rock into July, and we're in a warm neutral right now, +1, plus 0.15. You round up, that's a 0.02 No, 0.2. There we go. I'm sorry. Wow. I got a lot of numbers and whatnot going on in my mind. So we're in a warm neutral right now out there in the Pacific, which means that 2004 is definitely on the table in terms of an analog. I don't think we didn't have any storms in 2004 in July, but still, if you notice, the general trend here on this map is here. And that's where a lot of our stronger ensemble members do come into play. If you look at our last run of the European model, see that? We do have a number of members. I still don't understand this. I wish that we didn't have major hurricane ensembles down here, but it has probably something to do with our ridge. But notice that the general trend is still in that general direction, unless it's much weaker. So I'm definitely keeping an eye on the trends here with Enzo, because this is also going to dictate steering flow and etc. And at this point in time, our forecasts for a La Nina at this point are busted. Because if you guys remember, June was about La Nina, but then we were like, July, La Nina is here, and we would have to drop instantly as we wander into July to get that La Nina going. And as you guys can see through time from late March, early April, it's not a boom. We're not going to go down the roller coaster here. We're going to slowly trend down. So if you were to take this point and mathematically put it here and extrapolate it, even if we start to trend down over time, it'll be less like this, with those random heating patterns and whatnot. And you can see as we go through time, we might be approaching La Nina by August, but right now La Nina is nowhere to be found at all. La Nina is not there. We are in a neutral pattern, which means El Nino influence is gone. So that helps the tropics, but we don't have La Nina yet. So we're waiting and watching. We're waiting and watching on a lot of different variables here. Waiting and watching. Alrighty, guys. For everybody still in the chat, like Ethan said, let's go ahead. Let's do it. Come on. Can I get a few more people? We need 9 more likes to get this chat to 200 likes. Let's do it, folks. We got a lot of folks in the chat right now, and I would love it if we could just get 9 individuals out there, 9 people watching, to nudge that like button. Give it a little bump. And let's get to 200 likes. Freezing, I agree. I can see a cool neutral to a weak La Nina. I really do. I can see that. Weak La Nina of like a +5 or a +0.5, +0.6 Enzo index. That would be like my generalized forecast if we were to dip into La Nina. But outside of that, I really don't see a strong or a bullish La Nina anymore. It just seems like we've missed the train. We've missed that roller coaster. So yeah, I will leave you with the water vapor satellite shot. We definitely, what about the Central Caribbean? Too far away. We're too far away. And I had answered that question earlier, Aston Gooden, earlier in the chat. We got to wait and see. We're still 4 to 5 days away from the Lesser Antilles, which means we're about 7 to 10 days away from the Central Caribbean. We have a lot of wiggle room. We have a lot of things in play. There it is. Thank you so much, guys. We're at 208 likes. Sincerely appreciate it. You guys are fantastic. I love it. And the likes are still climbing. Let's get this information out there. And for all my new viewers out there, I would genuinely appreciate if you joined the Weather Center community. As you can see, we are a tight-knit group here. No matter how big or small the chat is, I try to acknowledge everybody. And you're a part of the tropical community here, and we're all in this together, and that's exactly what it is, and we're all about here. So I sincerely appreciate every single one of you, whether you be a new viewer, someone just occasionally tuning in, someone who has been tuning in for an extended period of time and not subscribing. I still thank you very much as well for tuning in, getting a little bit of additional information, and thank you generously from the bottom of my heart, hitting that like button, giving those donations. It's incredible, guys. You guys inspire me to go above and beyond with this content. We've learned a lot since last year, and we're going to continue to refine our content. No scare tactics, no sensationalism. Might get a little excitement, obviously, because we're talking weather, and I'm very passionate about weather, but don't confuse that with inaccuracy and lies and, sensationalist and hyperbole. That's not what we're about here, and I can promise you guys that. Nazario, can Trinidad and Tobago, which might be south of the system, see tropical? Yes. Like I said, Trinidad and Tobago all the way up to Dominica and Martinique south. We need to be prepared for tropical storm impacts, period. Furthest to the north, you need to be watching out. You need to just pay attention. But windward islands all the way to the South America coastline, you need to be prepared for tropical storm impacts as this thing continues to consolidate. We've been tracking this for a while now, and it's on the horizon. We have the storm on radar, and now we just need to continue to monitor and see what the trends look like. We still have 4 to 5 days. We know who needs to be ready. We've covered that. We've hit it home. That hammer or that nail is through the table, through the wood at this point. We know what the timetable looks like. We still have about a week before this thing becomes a Central Caribbean player. So don't sweat it right now. If you're in Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, even the Turks and Caicos, there's still a couple of ensembles that try to go north. If you're out that far to the west, don't sweat right now. Let's just continue to watch. Lesser Antilles, we need to be getting ready. U.S. British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, you should have preparations in place. If not, start your preparations. And then further west from there, we're just watching. That's it. We're only going to watch. Griffin, to answer your question, we will see. We need pressing impacts. We need pressing updates. If we're still looking at a similar status quo tonight, then we're probably not going to go live. I'm going to save my energy for tomorrow morning. We'll definitely be live again tomorrow morning. But if there's anything big that pops up, I'm talking that could change the forecast or change the impacts for Lesser Antilles, then we'll be live. But if the status quo more or less stays the same, I'm not going to pummel you guys with the same information. That's not fair. That's wasting everyone's time. Let's just keep watching, put our energy and efforts elsewhere. I have another test I have to do today and another one of my classes too, so I got to save some brain power for that as well. I have weather coming at me from all angles at this point. I have weather here, weather with you guys, weather on other social media. I have weather in the Navy that I have to study for my promotion exam. I have weather in college. I have weather everywhere. I'm just weathering. So, yeah, we're working hard, guys. There's so much weather coming at me right now, but I'm here for it. This is what I signed up for, literally on the dotted line in the Navy and in the Air Force, and still going to keep trucking along. Chase the Weather, former Army EOD tech here. Salute to your service, my friend. Lived in Ocean Springs, Mississippi during Katrina. Wow. So then, Chase, you probably have a lot of stories to tell. In fact, Mike over on Instagram, him and I are always chatting offline. He's in for the occasional live streams. I still want to talk to him about his experience through Katrina in 2005. So, but I do appreciate that, Chase. I'll render the salute right back to you, especially as an Army EOD tech. That's not an easy job to do. I thank you for your service as well. Thank you for serving alongside us and doing your thing, being the 1%, as they always say. And yeah, guys, that's it. Let's go ahead and cut the live stream. I got to get ready for work. I got to make sure that there's no internet outages today, and there's a lot to watch, a lot to maintain, but gracious thank you to everybody out there watching, the donations. Everybody, you're all amazing, and I truly mean that. That's why I work so hard for you guys, because you deserve the hard work. You deserve the late nights, early mornings, and the information to the best of my ability. We're going to keep going. Remember, it seems like we're busy right now, but we're still only in June. We have a lot of hurricane season to go, so we're going to be busting some butt. That is for certain. Just think about it. It's only the end of June. We are not even through the first quarter. If this were a football game, we're not even through the first quarter yet of the hurricane season. So, got to make sure we're not full in on the first storm to just really go crazy with content. I also have to pace myself. We need to be hitting that marathon stride as opposed to a sprint. If we sprint, we're going to be burnt when August and September rolls around, and the end of July. The end of July is no joke either. We need to be on the radar again, talking tropics at the end of July. Look at that. We have our African standing wave is going to really ramp up as soon as we go into August. Starting in end of July, less than 30 days from now, our standing wave producing our tropical waves and our MCSs that move through Africa is really going to bust out. And then end of July into August, we're looking at favorable conditions and fairly anomalous conditions for the Atlantic and the Caribbean. So we're working hard right now. We're going to get a nice little vacation in the tropics. We'll be able to tone it down. We'll go back to our, couple live streams per week. Everybody can kick back and enjoy the summertime, and then it's real game on. So thank you all for watching. I'm not going to hold you up any longer. I know a lot of you have already left. I don't mind. It's okay. Leave me a comment in the comment section below if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Drop me a comment or a private message on Instagram, X, or my TikTok. Happy to get back to you. I always make it a point to reply to every single person on my social media. I always do. If there's a little bit of latency, I apologize. I haven't answered the comments from yesterday because for some reason since 4 o'clock and through till midnight, my internet went out, so I couldn't get back to anybody. Today, I'll make it a point, especially if work is a little slow and I can get through my exam, to answer all my comments and all the questions I may have. So we'll see you guys again soon. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Lesser Antilles, we're watching you. And then beyond that, we're going to be watching for everybody else. But until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario signing out.